So, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, welcome at today's event organized by the Institute for Politics and Society. My name is Jan Macháček, I am chairman of the board of the Institute, and I'm going to be moderating today's event, which is focused on important issues related to European integration. And I should first apologize. Yesterday evening we found out that Prime Minister will not be available because of the government-related issues, but he sent us a speech especially prepared for today's event. So we will open with his welcome speech, which is exactly the same speech as it would have been delivered if he was here in person. So let's start with the welcome speech.
Ladies and gentlemen, I am pleased that I can deliver the welcome speech for this conference called A Pivotal Europe Towards National Sovereignty or a European Identity. The title of your conference suggests that we are apparently faced with the choice, either national sovereignty or European identity. I feel, however, that such a duality is false. Membership in the EU shouldn't present us with such a dilemma, but should in fact guarantee both. National sovereignty should be the foundation and the concept of the European identity, the roof of the European Union project. There should be a relationship of equality between these two ideas. National sovereignty should support European identity and vice versa. Unfortunately, nowadays, this is not the case. After the ratification of the Lisbon Treaty, the EU started to push the concept of European identity at the expense of the concept of national sovereignty. Even though not too strong at first, this preference has become much more prominent in the past few years, with efforts to make decision-making in the EU even more centralized and to enlarge areas where decisions are being taken by qualified majority voting. The European Commission and the European courts have a much stronger tendency to interfere with the affairs of member states, such as is the case of Poland and Hungary, and the European Parliament is attempting to assert itself at the expense of individual countries, as the Czech Republic is well aware of. In short, there is an evident push coming from the political elites in Brussels and Western Europe to transform the EU into the supranational federation. Resistance to these attempts comes from countries in Central and Eastern Europe, most notably the V4. These countries were almost half a century a part of the Soviet bloc and are therefore very sensitive to steps leading to the erosion of their national sovereignty. One-sided and no-consensual efforts to create a supranational federation out of the EU are met with skepticism and suspicion. I believe that such a move is a fundamental mistake that will make the whole of EU weaker and, in the long run, runs the risk of unraveling the European project itself. From more and more people in the Czech Republic, I hear a story which goes something like this. In 2003, I had absolutely no doubt that voting yes in the EU membership referendum is the right thing to do. After more than 40 years of communist rule, it sent a clear message that the Czech Republic should again become part of the democratic Europe where it always belonged. In May 2004, when the Czech Republic joined the EU, I was full of optimism and high hopes and dismissed warnings from some politicians that the EU will take away our sovereignty as simply absurd. But today, I see that their predictions are unfortunately coming true. I feel disillusion and dissatisfaction. When I look at the EU, I see a very different organization than the one I voted to join back in 2003. I see an organization no longer promoting the free exchange of goods, people and ideas, but a swelling bureaucracy detached from the problem we face and at the same time interfering more and more with our everyday lives. And all the good the EU has done is being overshadowed by ridiculous policies such as most recently the proposals being pushed through by the European Commission in connection with the Green Deal, like emission allowances for homes and transport. Instead of presenting an opportunity for growth, I consider the EU's presence as interfering and imposing. The EU wants to tell us how to travel, where to live, what to eat. It feels as if the EU has become a club for the rich and powerful that are trying, through some social experiment, to change our way of life, not by consensus, but by force. This is wrong, and this certainly is not the EU I wish to be part of. I feel cheated. Had I known this, I would never have voted yes in the referendum. This is the story I hear, but this is not the story I want to hear. Ladies and gentlemen, it is evident that the EU has changed considerably. 30 years ago, the vision of the European Union was based on the single market and its 4 freedoms, the free movement of goods, people, services and capital. However, especially after the Treaty of Lisbon, the political aspect got the upper hand over the economic one. A common foreign and security policy emerged, a shift from unanimity to qualified majority voting took place, and the European Parliament acquired more power at the expense of member states, a Bill of Rights was introduced, etc. EU presence became felt in more and more areas of life. But that does not mean that the EU does not have positive results in some fields. It is efficient in negotiating and finishing the free trade agreements with our countries. At the same time, however, the EU is unable to use its power abroad, even in a region neighboring Europe. The EU must be a strong and visible player when a crisis hits Ukraine, Armenia, Turkey, Syria, Libya, Iraq, etc. Otherwise, no one will take the EU seriously. I believe this is a time to admit that the European project is failing the ideals and ideas it has been founded on. Even though the EU acquired more and more powers, it did nothing to complete the project which it had started. The single market has still not been finished. The 4 freedoms not fully achieved. The foreign and security policy looks good on paper, but in reality is not existent. The strategy of the Schengen area is incomplete, with some EU members still not being permitted to join. Enlarging Schengen should be easier than enlarging the EU. But even after 10 years in the European Union, Bulgaria and Romania are still not members of the Schengen area. Illegal migration is causing serious problems in Western Europe, with more and more cities being unable to cope with the problem. Yet instead of trying to solve the problem, the idea of migration quota lives on. Only now do states that were criticizing Hungary for building a fence in 2015 on its border ask the European Commission for money to build their own fences. The list could go on. Despite all this unfinished business, Brussels has growing appetite for more power and for more policies where to exercise control. Coming back to my metaphor of the EU as a house, if national sovereignty are the foundations and European identity is the roof, then powers which have been appropriated by the EU are the rooms of the house. I see that the EU is trying to extend the house and at the same time attempting to cover all of these new extensions by the roof without strengthening the foundation upon which the house rests. Even more surprising is the fact that there are no clear plans as to how large should the house be, how should have access to it, or how should it look. The result is an increasingly unstable house. In fact, a part of this house fell off a few years back, yet building continues unabated. Ladies and gentlemen, I believe the European Union needs to take a long, hard look at what it has become, an increasingly rigid structure, moving away from citizens it was set up to serve. If we don't want the whole structure to come crashing on our heads, I think it is absolutely crucial to stop building our house and start reinforcing it. We must complete the project left unfinished, most importantly the single European market and the Schengen area, the requirement of which is a well-guarded external border. After completing these steps, I believe we should examine the powers delegated to Brussels and in certain areas give them back to member states. Under no circumstances should more powers be delegated to Brussels, and under no circumstances should we enlarge area of qualified majority voting in the European Council, thus getting rid of unanimity in areas like taxation, social policies, family law and foreign policy. In short, we must strengthen the foundation, i.e. national sovereignty of member states, and again achieve a balance between the idea of European identity and national sovereignty. What we need is not more of the EU, but a stronger EU. What we need is not more delegated powers to Brussels, but wrapping up unfinished projects. What we need is not more of a federation, but more of nation states. Only then can the EU continue as a project which people will trust and support. Thank you for your attention.
And now let me introduce Dita Charanzová, Vice Chairman of the European Parliament and Member of the European Parliament on behalf of Anonymity. So she would have her welcome remarks.
So, good morning, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. Warm welcome to this discussion and special warm welcome to our special guest, my dear colleague, my friend, Guy Verhofstadt. We are happy that you are with us today. Also, after what we've heard from the Prime Minister, I'm sure we will have a very exciting debate on where to go and how to build the future of Europe. When I was elected in the European Parliament back in 2014 with my friend Martina Dlabajová, yes, indeed, it was different Europe. And we went, after over these 7 years, we went through different challenges. Being that we lost one member, we went through the migration crisis, we had Eurozone challenges, we had terrorist attacks in Europe, and now we have the pandemic. And all of this, it made us reflect what we should do better and better together. The difference now, why we have this discussion, is that we also realize that it should not be only us, me, György, Martina, talking in Brussels about the future. We want the citizens. We want the citizens, we want to have this bottom-up approach, to discuss with them how they see the future of Europe, what they want the Europe to deliver for the new generation, but also for the older generation. So that's why we started the project of the Conference on the Future of Europe. We are very happy that we have the co-chair of this conference, and I'm really looking forward to this debate. Thank you very much.
So I think we can, as speakers, take this mask off. And let me start this first interview part of today's small conference. I should mention that Guy Verhofstadt is not only former Belgian Prime Minister, former Vice Chairman of the European Parliament, and co-chair of this conference on the future of Europe. About this discussion is part of it, by the way. And but I have always considered him also an intellectual who has a strong vision of Europe, which is quite well structured, and he's courageously fighting for it, even writing articles of which I am an enthusiast reader, for instance, in Project Syndicate, etc. So it's kind of exceptional, I can say, in Europe that we have politicians who also have a very structured vision of Europe, and I admire it. So this is for the beginning, and that's why we gonna have this discussion. So I first would have a question. And I have to warn that you have to be short in all the response. We have like 35 minutes, I believe. And so first, like, could you summarize in what ways the EU is succeeding according to you, and where it is failing according to you? So what's your take on this?
And I have to do that in 2 minutes. But that's impossible, I think, because so maybe first of all, thank you very much for the invitation to come to talk about this conference on the future of Europe, and let me directly enter into the matter. I am as critical towards the European Union as Andrej Babiš. I think that today we fail in a number of issues, and the best example of the failure was naturally a country like the UK leaving the European Union. It's difficult to say, oh, it goes very well with the European Union. The UK is leaving. It's a proof of the fact that things are not going well. And then on top of that, we got the different crises, the financial crisis, where we reacted very late. We got the migration crisis, which is still ongoing, in fact. Look to what happens for the moment on our border with Belarus. There is the COVID crisis, with this new crisis, and there is then this ongoing weakness of the European Union in the neighborhood, when it concerns Ukraine, when it concerns Syria, when it concerns Libya, where it concerns whatever place in our neighborhood are 1,000 kilometers from our neighborhood, it are others who are deciding. If we go outside of Afghanistan, it's not the Europeans who decide, it's the Americans who decide, and we follow like little children. That is the reality of today. And such a European Union will not survive, in my opinion, the 21st century. So my criticism towards Europe is maybe bigger than those of the Prime Minister of Andrej Babiš, because I think that this Europe is not capable to act sufficiently fast and accurate, and is always acting too little too late. So that is my answer to your question, where are the failures? So I have given a number of them. We can come maybe immediately to how to solve them. But I want to end my first intervention by saying I'm very much in favor of sovereignty. But you have to understand that in the world of tomorrow, to exercise sovereignty only on the national level will not help you very far. The reality is that the most of our challenges are not national, but transnational. Why we talk about migration is transnational. Why we talk about climate change is transnational. Why we talk about terrorism is transnational. Why we talk about every issue of today, it is transnational. And the threat, for example, by other parts of the world, for example the Chinese, is a real one. And I have to tell you that neither China, neither India are nations, it are civilizations. For example, India has 200 ethnies, nations inside its borders, has 20 different languages, has 4 big religions, and at the same time is the biggest democracy. So it's not by saying, okay, we're gonna retreat behind the national borders that you can solve the problem. Nevertheless, I agree 200% with the introduction of Andrej Babiš when it concerns the single market. The single market, everybody is talking about the single market, but in reality, there are big parts, even the majority of the services and the goods in Europe are not in the single market. When you talk about telecom, mobile, digital, 5 or 6G in the future, services like insurances, banks, finances, all this is not in the single market. It's outside the single market. I am always saying, yeah, we have a single market for chocolate, that's good for Belgium, as you know, and waffles maybe, but we don't have a real single market in these services of the future. If you have not a single market for digital and not a single market for finance, yeah, maybe that's not the best bit for the world of tomorrow. And the consequence of it is that we are, not very present in the digital world. And the digital giants are not European. The digital giants are American and Asian today. They are all American, all Asian. So there is absolutely something to do on the single market to make it a real integrated market. So there I agree fully. And at the same time, let's not be naive. If we want to defend our interest in the world, we're going to come back to this, the energy sector. So you see how vulnerable we are with there is no European energy policy or energy sector. Everybody's doing his own thing. The one believes in nuclear, the other doesn't believe in nuclear, the one thinks we need more gas, the other thinks no, the one thinks you have to come to gas from America, the other thinks we can continue to do it with Nord Stream 2 coming from Russia, and so on. And then you have to buy energy on the world market. With 27, what is a stupid idea? You do it better as a single market, naturally. So I think really that this union, as it works today, or it doesn't work today in many, even when there are positive evolutions, and so we can come back to this during the debate, needs a fundamental reform. And the conference on the future of Europe, the purpose of the conference is to define the way forward, together with the citizens, with an active participation of the citizens during the whole process.
Okay, thank you very much. And what about the successes?
I think
what are you proud of?
Well, the last positive thing that we got was the reaction to the COVID crisis. Let's be honest. I agree with those who are saying, there is a grasp of power by Europe, by Brussels and so on, but it was not Brussels who asked to have a health union. It were the citizens and the member states and everybody who said at the beginning of the COVID crisis, oh, hell, Europe is not responsible for health. Let's make Europe responsible for health, because then we're going to have vaccines, we're going to produce them, we're going to have... that's the reality. I don't say that it was perfect, certainly not from day one. It was perfect. Far from that. But the reality is it was the societies, the people, the citizens who requested that Europe would have a health union and a common policy. And secondly, we reacted far better to the economic consequences of this crisis than after the financial crisis. You remember after the financial crisis, it has taken 10 years before Europe reacted to a financial crisis that came from the US. It was not in Europe that the financial crisis was born. Now we reacted far better. We established the 750 billion euro Next Generation Fund to help the 27 member states to overcome the negative fallout. And we did it by creating Eurobonds, by doing it in a European way. So still I have also there a little bit of criticism, because I would like that this a bigger part of that money would be used for really pan-European projects. 5G, the absence of a semiconductor industry in Europe, the next developments in the digital world, so that artificial intelligence, supercomputers, that will be the world of tomorrow. And if we want to take the lead, well, use that money to do that. But nevertheless, the reaction to the COVID crisis was much better now than after the financial crisis. That's clear.
Thank you. So you are, as I mentioned before, a proponent still of European federalism. The trouble with federalism is that when people talk about it, they don't even agree what federalism is elementary. Some people think about centralization, some people think about decentralization. So what's federalism according to you these days? I think what is being overlooked, that it can even mean less integration, less centralization in some areas, but more stronger centralization in very important areas. And it also means in a competition. In a competition is one of the pillars, right? And it also means like that we need to have a second chamber of the parliament, which is kind of also a definition of the federalism. But the question is like, what this second chamber is like. So what's your take on discussion on federalism, and what's your position, and how is it changing, or is it changing or developing, facing events and crises?
But there is no European federation today. Let's be very clear that the basic principle of the decision-making inside the European Union is still the unanimity rule, and that is clear. But for example, in migration, based on the treaty, that is qualified majority. But the Council decided not to apply that rule and to do it by unanimity. And that's the reason why already for now 20 years we don't have an agreement on how to tackle migration inside the European Union. So the main problem to overcome is not to realize a federal dream, is to overcome the blocking of the decision-making inside the Union. Look, we have now again with Lukashenko these problems. It will take again weeks and months before Europe will react. That is not possible in the world of today. That you have to wait weeks and months before you can react, because things are moving on. Things are going so fast. And not only in foreign policy, you see that. By the way, I have to tell you that I think one of the biggest waste of money also in the European Union is foreign policy and defense policy, especially because we spend a lot of money in Europe on defense, but with not a very convincing outcome. So we spend, so people don't know that, but you have to know that we spend 4 times more than the Russians on defense in Europe. 4 times more. They spend more or less $65 billion a year. We spend altogether, without the UK, with the UK it's 300 billion. Without the UK it's a little bit of $240 billion. That's 4 times more. At the same time, we spend more or less 30–40% of the Americans on defense. But we can only do 10% of the operations of the American army. So I'm a lawyer, I'm not a mathematician. But nevertheless, I was Minister of Budget in my life, in my previous life. But I'm always saying, to be Minister of Budget is not necessarily to know something about mathematics. So the only thing what you need to know is the word no. That's the only thing what the Minister of Budget needs to know. But even I, as a lawyer, know that when you spend 30–40% of the Americans, you can only do 10% of their operations. You are 3 to 4 times what? Less effective than that. And that is what is happening in Europe. We are not capable to defend ourselves without the help of the Americans, because we are duplicating everything 27 times in Europe. That doesn't work in the world of tomorrow. The world of tomorrow is a very difficult world with big empires like China, like India, like the US, like Russia, who thinks it's always has thought that it was an empire, and so on and so on. That is the world of tomorrow. And to survive and to defend our interest, the interest of our citizens in such a world, you need an effective European Union, and not a weak European Union, not a union who is blocked every day by unanimity. So for me, the first step to the first thing to do is we have to end unanimity. So that's and also the second thing, to have also a little bit one hat in the European Union, not Sofagate. You remember that what happened when our European leaders went to Ankara to Erdogan. What a shame. Or when we received the Nobel Prize, we are running with 3 presidents to Oslo, like a few years ago. That needs to be solved. You cannot work in the modern world if you don't solve these problems.
Okay, thank you. And I would like to ask now about concepts of multi-speed Europe versus concept of two-speed Europe. I think that we already have multi-speed Europe in some areas, like Schengen was mentioned in the speech of Prime Minister. We have Eurozone and out of the Eurozone countries and other aspects. But whereas multi-speed Europe is a reality, and the two-speed Europe is certainly not in the interest of countries which are not in the Eurozone or are not heading to the Eurozone soon. And so what's your take on this, multi-speed versus two-speed?
Well, there are many people who are saying multi-speed is then the solution to solve our difference of point of view in Europe. I think it weakens Europe. For today, the European Union is like a menu card in a restaurant. You go in, you take the menu card and say, I don't like this, I like that, I want this, but I don't want that. Look, it's like in the US. Imagine one moment that in the United States it works like Europe. Imagine, 2 seconds. For example, that California is saying, look, the dollar, no, we're gonna go back to the peseta. And you know, the peseta was a currency in the US in the 19th century until 1870, used in California. And so imagine that in California, say the dollar, no, we go back. Or for example, in Massachusetts, you're saying, look, the FBI, nice organization, the federal board investigation, but the FBI, we're gonna not participate. We're gonna not do that. We're gonna stay out of the FBI. The same with whatever other policy. We should say these Americans are completely crazy, but that's exactly what we do in Europe. Denmark is not a member of Europol. To give an example, there are countries in Schengen and countries out Schengen, and there are countries who want to be in Schengen, there are not in Schengen, and there are countries outside the European Union who are not member of the European Union but are in Schengen. You have to understand it. So Switzerland, for example, is the example of that. So you can be a member of the European Union and be out Schengen, and not a member of the European Union and be in Schengen. The same in European arrest warrant. We started with that. The Italians have taken 10 years, have been 10 years out of the system. I am always thinking that it was Berlusconi, because he thought that we should use it against him, this European arrest warrant. So for 10 years up, the Italians were not in. The European patent, the same. The euro, another example. So I think all this patchwork, like I say, this so-called multi-speed Europe, this menu card for Europe, is weakening Europe. How can you defend the interest of the European Union if you have not a unity on these fundamental issues like For example, the currency, for example, the freedom of movement, for example, the common position to the outside world. So I'm not in favor of multi-speed Europe, and I think it's weakening Europe, and it is a false proposal to solve the problem. It doesn't solve the problem. It makes the problem bigger.
Okay, thank you. Next question has to do with the results of elections in Germany. There has always been it was always been a French kind of policy to have more integration of the Eurozone, more institutional integration of the Eurozone, not only the central bank. Germany was always opposing it. Current coalition negotiation looks like that the finance ministry would belong to FDP. Do you expect any changes in this after the elections in Germany, that Germany would be ever willing in an era after Merkel also to be willing to integrate the Eurozone further without waiting for countries like ours to get in?
Yeah, no, I think there will be a change with the new government. You feel it already. I have seen the first texts also of the coalition agreement that they are negotiating for the moment. They are in the middle of it, and that's a very pro-European line. Yeah, but in a very rational, intelligent way. So I expect a change, because let's not forget. You talk about France and Germany. First of all, it's not only France and Germany who have to decide in Europe. There is the Europe of 27, and this with the 27 that we have to decide. And secondly, what is hopefully changing is what. So we have to understand a little bit that since the German reunification, the roles have changed. Before the German reunification, Germany was a country who want more European integration, because for them, after the Second World War, that was their link to life, I should say, to decency. That's the reality. And the French, they got an opinion about Europe who can be summarized as follows: if it is good for France, it's good for Europe. You know? That's more or less the thinking of the French at that moment. Well, with the reunification and the end of the Berlin Wall, that has completely changed. Germany became the biggest country, and they began to behave as the French. And the French started to behave as Germans. What is very strange to see that in Europe and at European level. So we have now a French president who is pushing the most of all his colleagues for a pro-European agenda, what is not very French. And on the other hand, we got, for more than a decade, a German chancellor who was saying not this, not that, and for example, even in the migration crisis, saying we're going to do it ourselves, and absolutely not on trying to find a European solution. That's the reality. And I hope that this will change now with the new government. That there is a new government with that again, France and Germany will speak the same language. What was not the case the last 10 years. Not the case. Absolutely not. On different issue. If they speak again the same language, that is not sufficient to solve our problems, but that will be a game changer. That will be changing the dynamic inside the European Union to come forward with a number of proposals, even on a fiscal union. Because let's be honest, people are talking about a fiscal union like the end of the world. But tell me, someone, we have a currency. Do you know a currency without a union, fiscal union behind? That doesn't exist in the world. A country can always exist without a currency. That exists. There are countries who are not using their own currency and using the dollar, for example, or even the euro in a few cases. That exists. But the opposite doesn't exist. That there exists a currency without a state authority behind. That I have never seen. And the problems that we have in the European Union, economic problems we got after the financial crisis, came from that, naturally. That you got the currency, but not the fiscal union, not the banking union, not this, not that. So that is not sustainable. If you don't want that, then you don't need to go forward with the currency. It's the one or the other. Or you want a monetary union, and you need also everything what is necessary to make this monetary union work, or you don't want. I think that this monetary union is a good thing, and that we underuse, in fact, the euro. We don't use the euro to his full potential as a real world currency that can compete with the yen, with the dollar, with every currency. And so we have now these euro bonds that we have launched for 750 billion. It's the first time we are doing that. Have you seen? They are sold in 2 seconds. In 2 seconds, people want more of that. So that means that people, the world of investment, has trust in the euro, and that we need to take advantage of it. The euro means lower interest rates, for example, instead of what we got in the past. The euro means stability. The euro means that you have a currency where you can go on the world market and buy things. So that is the advantage of it. And if you want that, you need also if you say A, you have also to say B. That means that you need a fiscal union behind it. And is that a threat for the member states? I should say no, because let's be honest, the total budget of the European Union, dear friends here in this room, is 1% of the European GDP. So people were saying, oh, the superstate Europe, or superstate Europe, 1% of European GDP. You know what it is in America? It's 25%. In Switzerland, that's a confederation, 15%. So the Confederation of Switzerland has 15% of the Swiss GDP to run the country as a confederation. And Europe does that with 1%. And then we all say, yeah, Europe needs to do this, and Europe needs to do that, and Europe needs to do better this, and with 1%, let's be honest. Well, it is a joke. We have to say that with the Next Generation Europe Fund, naturally, we increase that. So that's, we go from 1 to 2%. That is, in fact, what we really do with the Next Generation Fund, the doubling of the possibilities of the Union. Well, so, I think that let's not have afraid, and I expect a change in the relationship between France and Germany.
Okay, thank you. What's your take on divisions in Europe? After the financial crisis and during the Eurozone crisis, there was constant talk about the North and South division. Poland at the time was saying we are the part of the North. Now it's more on the table, East-West divide, rule of law issues, etc. in Poland, Hungary. So there is once again on the table East-West divide, but with the energy crisis and inflation, maybe we will have soon again North and South crisis on the table. So what's your take on these divisions, North and South, East and West, and what are your predictions?
Well, they are there, but they disappear from time to time. So the North-South, with COVID, everybody got COVID, so there was no... The division disappeared because COVID was a threat everywhere and got negative economic consequences everywhere. And I'm pretty sure that also the East-West, it's depending also on who is in power. If tomorrow there is a new Polish government, and I hope in the next election as a liberal that or new partners there will win the elections, or if the opposition wins the election in Hungary, for example, next year, it is in April, if I'm not mistaken, then we will talk about, then nobody will longer talk about an East-West. I think it's wrong to every time divide Europe. North, South, when it concerns financial issues, East, West, when it concerns other issues. For example, rule of law, it's not because there is an autocratic leader in a country that this is that, oh yeah, and that is Eastern Europe, you know? That's a complete, or Central Europe, that's a complete unacceptable for me stigmatization of citizens and peoples in Europe. The way the Central and Eastern European countries liberated themselves from the Soviet authoritarianism is an example that I didn't have seen in many other countries in the European Union. So we were not always so full of courage against our the oppression we have felt we got in the past. So I am against this stigmatization, and I think that we have not to follow that. So by saying there is a north and a south, and there is naturally a north and a south and an east and west, and there are differences, that's evident. But I'm always saying that the difference between somebody who lives in the north of India and with somebody in the south of India is bigger than between a Finn and someone citizen of Naples.
Okay, thank you. Our next question is about strategic autonomy, which is also more or less an idea which is pushed by France and more discussed after creation of AUKUS, which is this nuclear submarine alliance between Australia, US and UK. But is this, will it ever happen, or will we always rely on NATO and the US? Is it more than a rhetoric exercise ever? Or
no, it's more than a rhetoric exercise, and there is also no contradiction between European defense and NATO. So people are saying, well, you have to choose between NATO and European defense. It's not true. European defense needs to be the European pillar of NATO. But things are changing. Look, when Biden comes a few months ago, to the summit of the NATO, it was 2 months ago, I think, he came to Brussels, NATO summit. What he said, what he was talking about. He was talking about China. In my opinion, China is in the South Pacific, not in the North Atlantic. If I am not mistaken, China is in the South Pacific and not in the North Atlantic. Nevertheless, he talked about China, about the South Pacific, in the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. So that means what? That means that the whole, challenge in defense and security has changed today. It's no longer an East-West European divide. It are challenges on the world level. So if that is true, we need to reform the NATO. And if you reform the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, we need to reform it into a treaty organization to defend democracies and human rights in the world. That's what we need to do. And that means the involvement of Australia, that means the involvement of Japan, that means the involvement of a number of Asian countries. So in that sense, it becomes normal that we Europeans organize the European pillar inside NATO. And we do it really. Instead of every time talking about increasing the budget. You know, increasing the budget, the military budget in Europe will not solve any problem because we are duplicating everything. So now we are spending $250 billion. If we spend tomorrow $280 billion or $300 billion, what will it change? Nothing at all. So the problem is European defense is not organized. Nevertheless, it was the first project of the founding fathers of the European Union. You remember that in the 50s. And it were the French, the National Assembly, etc., who stopped at that moment the launch of the European defense community. So it's a little bit cynical that it now are the French who are pushing most for that, because they have blocked it in the 50s and now they are requesting it. And I think we have to go in that direction. That doesn't change national sovereignty, that doesn't change the fact that all our countries are in NATO, but that organizes the European pillar in NATO and the capacity of Europe eventually to go to an operation even when the Americans have another interest in it. So we can have sometimes, we have the same values as the Americans, But sometimes we have not the same interests. Values and interests are different topics, different things. And therefore, European defense is absolutely necessary. On top of that, like I already said, it's the biggest waste of money in Europe. If people would know how that money is spoiled, in fact, in Europe because of duplication, and again duplication, then nobody would have a problem, I think, with the European defense community.
Thanks. How would you evaluate the development in Atlantic relationship with Joe Biden and maybe with the potential threat of Trump coming back? Are you happy with improving relationships under Biden? Or are you also disappointed in some fields? And what are your expectations for the near future?
I think that the relationship is a little bit better than in the past, but that's not difficult because with Trump there was no relationship, or it was absolutely not a friendly relationship anymore. And at the same time, everybody thought, Biden is coming, it will be like in the past. That's not true. The past is not coming back. The Americans, their attention is more into the Pacific. We know that it started already with Obama. It's not Trump who started that shift in the foreign policy of the US. So that's the reason more. Not to be naive, not to think, oh, look, it's now Biden, so everything is okay again. No, we have to be aware that the attention of America will shift to more and more to the Pacific and less to Europe. And that's a reason to take our own responsibility. Not against the Americans, but just to strengthen. By the way, the one who has understood that is Biden. You have seen that Biden, a few weeks ago, have said after contacts with the French president that there is a need for a European, more robust European defense community. Biden says that. Therefore, finally, also in the think tanks of the Democratic Party, they start to understand that they need to stop what the Americans did in the past, that is to be afraid of European military cooperation. And they start to see that by having a more enhanced European military cooperation, we could have better results in practice on the military field than with the actual way of working and thinking.
Thanks. How would you evaluate EU after Brexit? Are we already missing UK in the European integration project, in the European structures, institutions? And in what sense?
We are not completely missing them because we are busy with negotiating with them. Now fish and Northern Ireland and this and that, so there are a lot of problems. But let's be honest, the Brexit is certainly very negative in my opinion, because it's always stupid that a big country is leaving the Union and leaving the single market. But it has got one positive effect. That is that people said, oh, after Brexit you're going to see, there's going to be a Dexit, the Danish going out, there's going to be an exit, the Dutch going out, there's going to be maybe even a Frexit, the French going out, and what we have seen is exactly the opposite. So people have not followed, and you have seen that also in the last European elections. And we have seen for the first time in decades an increase of participation in the European elections with 10 points. It's not small, you see this increase in the participation. So the Brexit has not, so I think that people have reacted to Brexit in the following way. Maybe, we have also some criticism towards the European Union, but we are not so stupid to leave the European Union. That's the main sentiment with people. Because people like the European project. They don't like the European Union as it works today. They feel, their impression is, that the way Europe works today is not fulfilling their European dream. But they like the European project. We do that now in the conference. We have the citizens panels. What we feel there in the citizens panels is exactly that. People are saying, we like Europe, European project, that's the future, but the way it works now, that's not migration, that, COVID this, and so on and so on. So weakness in the neighborhood, that are the main arguments that are used. So in a certain way, Brexit has reinforced that Europe as a project, while it has in a certain way weakened the European Union as the implementation of that project, and that's a reason to reform it, Europe, and unanimity, for example, have one hand in charge, creating digital standards in Europe with one authority in Europe who is responsible for that. Rolling out 5G in Europe. We have 5G, we have Nokia and Ericsson who can do that. Why are we all talking about the Chinese network in Europe when we have European companies who can do it? Semiconductor industry was a discussion we got yesterday, Dita. Semiconductor industry, the semiconductors of the future are invented in Europe and the production lines are produced in the Netherlands. What are we talking about? Why we don't have it then? Because we don't use, for example, the money of Next Generation Fund to say we're going to use that money to create our own strategic autonomy in semiconductors. So that our car industry has no shortages in semiconductors. And so the list is long. The list is long. The same in the digital world. The same in the digital world, where you find the internet platforms are all American, all Asian. Why? Because if somebody here in the room wants to start a new application on internet using mobile, yeah, he is very encouraged to really start that in Europe. He needs 27 authorizations in Europe. In America, you need one. FCC, it calls, the Federal Communication Commission, FCC. And then, if you use mobile, you need to make more than 100 deals in Europe with the mobile operators, because we have more than 100 mobile operators in Europe. Why? Because every Minister of Finance wants to keep the money for the licenses of this mobile for his own. So the consequence is that we have 103, 104 mobile operators in Europe. So start once something where an app, you need 27 authorizations of 27 national authorities, plus more than 100 deals with mobile operators. That's the story of Spotify, the streaming service, who went to the US to roll out their model. And when they were successful there, they came back here. Because in America there are 3, 4 mobile operators. In China there are 3 mobile operators. It's very clear. So to do business, to roll out something, it's easier. So that are the challenges, I should say, of the future. Create our own semiconductor industry. Create our own 5G network, where we have the capacity to do so. Create other things I have seen this morning in the newspaper. Cryptocurrency. So people are saying cryptocurrency. Look, cryptocurrency will stay with us for decades. That's the reality. This is the market who has created cryptocurrency. Why not, instead of saying, create a standard for it so that it becomes, we did that once, a standard, where we're successful. You remember the old mobiles we got? What was the mobiles we got? It was GSM was the name. That was a European standard. And this European standard created an enormous industry. Nokia, Ericsson. Nobody used it, Asian phones at that time, or American phones. It were European phones. Because there was a European standard who was worldwide accepted. That is what we need to do. If we say a standard, and we say, look, in Europe, it's Ericsson or Nokia 5G technology, well, it's like that. Why not doing that? I can say, yeah, but competition, but you can have competition. I am in favor of competition, I'm a liberal. I like competition, but not in the way that we don't develop our own industries, that we don't develop our own capacity, autonomy, sovereignty. It's that what we are talking about. Sovereignty. What is a sovereignty? When it is a Chinese network that is running here, when the data we produce go to America and they make the profits with it. That's the reality of today. We make the most data in the world, Europeans. Well, you're busy. Those who are now texting on their phone are making data. Who are using the data? Your data that you're making. Typing for the moment will be used by the Americans to make profits. So we make the content, they make the profit. And using maybe a Chinese network to do so. Fine, okay, let's continue. No, we cannot continue like that. Well, we can continue like that, but we will, then in a few years of time, we will have maybe a system in Europe, like in China, where they control you. When you go from one part of the street to the other of the streets, have you used the, how you call that, zebra path and the white, I don't know what the English word is for that. So they control your how you behave. That's the reality what the Chinese do with
social ratings.
Yeah. And if you have behaved well, you will have good points, and if you have good points, maybe you can go to a trip outside China. That's the way it works. Do you want to live in such a society? I don't want to live in such a society. I want a society where there is privacy, there is a room of maneuver, where I have my freedom, and so on. That is the way. So we need a European model for that. And the Americans, well, for them it's the money. So they keep our data, they use it, and and Facebook and so on are busy to kill the Western liberal democracy, yeah, with their algorithms. Because what is Facebook? You click on football, and then for 2 years afterwards, every day, more football, and so on. I like football, that's not at the point, but to tell you that this is not the way a modern democracy can survive.
Thank you very much. We have to go for the second panel now, but so I would like to invite other panelists to join us. But we have a 1 minute video during which we will be seated here. So, okay, so let me welcome panelists for this round of discussion. First, once again, welcome Dita Charanzová, Vice Chairman of the European Parliament. Hello. I have to apologize that Jakub Kulhánek, Minister of Foreign Affairs, got sick, so he apologized today morning. His deputy, Mr. Jan Kohout, was willing to come flexibly. Hello. Let me welcome Milena Hrdinková, State Secretary of Europe. Good morning, and once again, Mr. Verhofstadt will be part of this discussion also. We have several other important questions to focus on, and we would like to start with the rule of law question and the superiority of European judicial institutions like the European Court of Justice of the European Union, CJEU. So some people are discussing this topic that it's a purely question of Poland, which recently said that Polish constitution and Polish law is not in important fields, is not a subject of the decision making of the European Court. But it's not exactly just, because there are the same issues as far as Germany is concerned, when European or similar issues, when European Court decided that I could say like monetary policy of European Central Bank buying the bonds as part of quantitative easing, if I make it simple, said that it's okay and it's within the European law. German Constitutional Court said that it is not your business, it's business of the German Constitutional Court, and we are superior in this respect. And so it's not Poland, it's not the only country in this respect which said that there are questions to be discussed as far as the national sovereignty and sovereignty of Polish judicial institutions. So it's not as simple as it is often discussed, but maybe my other panelists would disagree. So we will start again with Mr. Verhofstadt. What is your take on this discussion in Poland about superiority of Polish constitution and the European Court of European Court of Justice of the European Union?
So to be very clear about this, the whole discussion in Poland is not about the primacy of EU law, etc., etc. There comes a new government, a conservative government. The conservative government wants to change the judges. They want to get rid of the old justice system and the old judges who were there. So what they have done is to put in place a whole system with disciplinary court, then also backed by a new composition of the Constitutional Court to do that. And the one who have, those who are making that difficult is the European Court of Justice, because the European Court of Justice already into 3 cases have condemned that. So what they decide now is that same Constitutional Court, where there are judges that have been nominated against the ruling of the European Court of Justice, are saying that this European Court of Justice ruling doesn't apply in Poland. That's the last, that's simply the move. And that was very clear in the debate with Morawiecki in the European Parliament. For those who have missed it, it's interesting to look to internet and to YouTube and to Facebook maybe to find out what Morawiecki said and how we reacted to that. That is at stake. It's all covered with a whole discussion about subsidiarity and the primacy of EU law, but that is, sorry that I used that word, it's bullshit, it's not true. The reality is that the peace government started to have a sort of a cleaning, in their opinion, of the justice system in Poland to get rid of a lot of judges, and that the final obstacle to go forward with that is the European Court of Justice. So what you do then? Well, that Constitutional Court says that, okay, yeah, but here in Poland the decisions of the European Court of Justice are not valid anymore. So that's the ultimate thing what they are doing. And that is a totally different case, in my opinion, than the German Constitutional Court. Even also with the German Constitutional Court, the Commission has started a procedure against that decision of the German Constitutional Court. So it's a German president of the European Commission starting a case, an infringement against the German Constitutional Court. So that seems to me normal, the normal way of thinking. What is not the normal way of thinking is what is happening in Poland.
Okay, thank you very much. So I would like now ask Dita Charanzová on her opinion.
Well, a lot has been said already. I would say that from my perspective, as someone who was a part of the negotiating team when we were negotiating the accession to the European Union. There we had different chapters, we had to meet different criteria, and it was very clear what we have to meet to become a part of the European Union. And we also knew that once you join the club, that there are certain rules that we have to respect. So we did it, and now what we see is happening in Poland is questioning a little bit this rules of the game, I would say, which is very unfortunate. And it's not only about Poland and Polish case, but also the Polish case has direct impact on the Czech Republic, by the way. We have the case on Turów, where when the Polish government decides not to respect the decision of the European Court of Justice, we have serious problems. So I don't like this fights back and forth between the member states and the European Court of Justice. I wish we could have avoided it, but still we need to respect that when there is a final decision of the European Court of Justice, it must be respected by Poland, by Germany, by France, by everybody.
Thank you. Milena Hrdinková, please, you have a microphone. No, you have on the table also.
That's a good one.
Sorry, that one was warm.
But you can have it. It's still warm. Talk too much.
Is it working? Yeah, okay. So, good morning everyone. Sorry for being late. Thank you very much for the invitation to this debate here. Not starting with the easiest topic, but okay. I mean, although I fully share the views actually of two previous speakers, I will bring in a different element, right? I have a very unique opportunity. I have had very unique opportunity to be part of many before meetings, so I actually know the Polish and Hungarian reasoning quite well. And I think that with rule of law, there are always two sides. I personally find the question, you know, is there supremacy of EU law or not, a little bit unfortunate and redundant, actually. If we want to have common rules, we need the court and we need everyone to some respect to respect courts' decisions, right? So I mean, there is not much to ask, and I think that Poland actually went a little bit over the top, you know, in this issue. But the question really is, where are the boundaries of the supremacy of the law, and where does it end? It's quite abstract concept, and the problem is that right now EU law is everywhere in our lives. We can discuss whether we are in exclusive competence of union or member state, but it's everywhere. It's very hard to find no area where there is no effect actually of EU law. But if there is, then maybe we can question whether there is competence of European, of Court of Justice of European Union. Sorry, I mean this for quite long, and as the name has changed, so I mix it up. Now, another unfortunate element in that is that Poland actually is somehow on the brink of misusing of historical context, I would say. Because what do they say when we discuss selection of judges and competences? They say historically there have still been a number of judges, and it is very relevant for the Czech Republic as well, who used to judge in 50s and 60s, and who used to actually deal with quite nasty cases, and we simply want to make sure that they do not continue in this job any longer, because we believe that they are not entitled. And I think that this is very, for me, and even emotionally for me, this is very strong argument actually. For me as a lawyer, this is quite difficult, because how you do it actually, because once you do find any tool, mechanism, how you get rid, very simply said, of these people, at the same moment you create a mechanism that can be misused against another group of people. So how to make this legitimate, it's very, very questionable. But I do see one element behind what Poland is doing in terms of selecting their judges as at least very valid and something what needs to be assessed. What's very helpful, I think, in this area is what the Commission did, that they created a selection of criteria where all member states' systems are being assessed against, so that we do have some common denominator, and we see, you know, where exactly, you know, the systems are different, where the Polish system varies from the others. So, you know, there, I think we need to be a little bit more careful. But for supremacy of the EU law in general, I don't think that Poland can actually win this war, and there is very, very narrow scope of situations and cases where we could advocate for national courts, whether constitutional or other, to not to be limited at all. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Coat.
Thank you for your invitation. Once again, I would like to apologize, Mr. Jakub Kulhanek, so I'm replacing him, hoping that it will be a good substitute. I was a little bit late, but I heard what Mr. Verhofstadt said, that most of the Europeans like the European integration, but not the way the EU is performing nowadays. This is, I would say, one of the examples. That's what we are now making the judges of the Polish justice system. I don't know if there is someone in the room from Polish embassy, so no one is here to defend the Poles, so I will do that. So, because it's always easy to speak about someone who is absent, who is not in the room, so he has no choice to defend themselves. So that's the principle. First, that means the primacy of the EU law. That I think it's clear for everyone, for all member states. And the rule of law has two aspects, in my view. There's the binding nature of the laws. No double standards in domestic law, no double standards on the EU level law. So what it means? That what constitutes the primacy of the EU law in member states, because we are still composed by member states, we are not one single European or the United States of Europe, means that only what is in those treaties has the primacy over the national law. Nothing else. And what is happening nowadays in the last couple of years? That's a creepy enlargement of the competencies of the EU different institutions, especially by the European Commission. So when we ask our friends in Poland, in other countries, we cannot apply double standards, and the second, the same sharp people we have to have on the European level, on the European Commission, sometimes maybe even on the European Parliament, but it's a sovereign, so they can do what they want according to or what they want in line with the treaties. But the basic fact is that must be applied. And what is about this ruling of the Polish court, and we have to look into the details, it's that what is not in the treaties has no primacy over national law. So that's true, that's simple, it can't apply. So we have to look at it. And in fact, it's provoking exactly those sentiments which are going against the EU. Current performing of the EU. We all need or we are willing to have the European integration, the strong EU. And in some cases, this is exactly what is so provoking some negative sentiments, because when Milena was saying that this is such a mixture of different competences, where we have such overlappings, that's so foggy, so that's not clear. And when I was the member of the Convention on the European Constitution, there was always the tendency, and we were willing to have a clear catalogue of the competencies and not this mix. That's my point.
Mr. Verhofstadt wanted to react briefly, but very briefly, because we have
because of the decision of the Polish court is not what you are explaining there.
The decision of the Polish court is not what you are explaining. The decision of the Polish court is about two articles, the treaty. Article 2 and Article 17. Article 2 is the ever closer union, and Article 17 is the European Court of Justice competence. So what they are saying, that these two articles are not longer applicable. Okay, that's exactly the British position, and the reason why the Brits left the European Union, and this is what Cameron also came asking to before the referendum. So that the European Court of Justice is not longer the Supreme Court on, and I'm talking about competence of the EU, I'm not talking about competences outside the EU. The competences outside the EU, the European Court of Justice has no competence. They cannot do anything on that. So that are the two articles. Article 2 and Article 17, that are the articles attacked in the decision by the Constitutional Court of Poland that are not longer applicable in Poland. And that's, again, exactly the British position and the reason why Brexit happened.
Thank you. We could have a whole conference about this issue, but we have to go.
I agree with you, but the next time I take copies of the translated copies in Czech of the decision of the Polish court, because we have heard it's not true that that was a unilateral debate in the European Parliament. Mr. Morawiecki was there. He could defend him. He has defended him. He started with an intervention of 30 minutes, or we have 5 minutes to counter him. So it was more in his advantage than in ours. And finally, the conclusion is the same. The conclusion is you cannot. This Article 2 and Article 17 had been approved by the PiS government. I was there in the European Council when the Lisbon Treaty and these articles were approved. It was done by the two Kaczynski brothers. They did it. The President and the Prime Minister of Poland.
Okay. I have to say that our think tank was having a discussion about it, which lasted an hour. It's available on the internet. We will definitely continue to discuss it in the future. It's very important, but let's go to our other topics. And I would ask all the panelists to be as much brief as possible. It will be a little bit like journalism-based. It was already touched by the Prime Minister in the opening and by Mr. Verhofstadt. But how would you evaluate the situation with these 4 freedoms of the single market and current state of it, of these 4 freedoms in the single market? So first, Dita.
Well, as someone sitting in the Commission on Internal Market for 7 years, I am very frustrated. And I remember when we prepared the presidency in 2009, and one of the motto of the presidency was Europe without barriers, how to complete single market. Now, when I was approached a few months ago by the government, and we were brainstorming about the topic of the incoming Czech presidency, I said it could be the same. Complete the single market. We can copy-paste the priorities from 2009 and have them valid for 2021-22. It's very sad. It's very sad. We had the president of the Commission, Mrs. Ursula von der Leyen, giving the State of Union speech and saying we will celebrate the 30th anniversary of internal market. Full stop. I will not celebrate it. It's a very sad anniversary because I cannot deliver. We haven't delivered enough. And it's especially valid here in the Czech Republic, which is very open economy, which very much depends on the internal market. And also the country, we are quite Eurosceptic, as you have just noticed in our debate. But whenever you ask people about Europe, what they like about Europe, they will mention internal market as on the first place. So definitely challenge, and a lot of has to be done. We have to talk about digital single market. If we don't succeed in the digital single market, forget European economy in the future. I was responsible for one legislative file during the last legislation, which was about the free flow of data. You know, data, this is the gold of the future. Recently, what was happening was that every country controlled the data, and where the data is stored only in member states. We have GDPR, we all respect the same privacy law, we all have this law, but every country decided to store its own data. They did not trust the server in Helsinki, in Paris. That was one of the examples that we managed to solve, but there are so many on my table in the commission I worked on, but definitely something where we need to deliver more.
Thank you very much, Mr. Verhofstadt.
No, I will be very short, really. But because I said already a few moments ago what I think about it, so that only 30–40% of the single market is really a single market, and that all the rest is still under, not in the scope of the single market. So digital, mobile, telecom, finance, insurance, so everything what has a link with the future is not in the single market. So champagne is in the single market, that's good, and other beverages, but that's my point. So, mainly the problem can only be solved if in crucial issues of standards there is a European authority who can decide.
Okay, thank you. Milena?
I fully share the frustration. I fully agree, and I also agree that the internal market and for freedoms are the most important thing for the Czech Republic. That's why I have been encouraging this as top priority for the Czech presidency, and I would like to add why I think this is happening, why we are so much struggling. In my view, it continues to be lack of convergence, and that's why we need to continue. We cannot say, okay, convergence now is at sufficient stage, we are there. We need to look back how founders of the communities actually saw internal market and its functioning and the whole complex, and we have to go back and see that, you know, single market, internal market will only function well if we have sufficiently economically homogeneous environment. And we have not been reaching this. We are not yet there. And that's why we need to continue working on the convergence, getting member states economically close, not only economically, but generally closer to each other. And we have to be very careful not to give up on this priority because of some other ambitions and priorities, because without convergence we will not reach full functioning of the internal market.
Thank you, Mr. Kohl.
Thank you. I just agree with Dita what she said. I remember this 2009 very well. We were together with a permanent representation preparing our presidency those days. But I would like to ask you, Dita, so where you see the roots of those difficulties, why we have not moved far enough? Yeah, that's you have described perfectly the situation, not as being, let's say, in the center of the decision making. So where you see the main obstacles, so on which level or in which state?
Okay, so
He's taking over your job.
Sorry for that. So, it's the journalist style.
Yeah. Well, it's. I think that we already went quite deep with this. So I would propose now to go to energy crisis and EU's role in it. There are definitely, all of us know that the prices of energy are growing dramatically, natural gas, oil, electricity, and it has to do with the post-COVID rise in demand, with post-COVID situation, but there are also like green policies of the EU to blame, and also the question of energy security. It's clear that energy companies are not investing enough under the pressure from activists, regulators, activist shareholders. So the development of new fields of natural gas, oil, the investment is decreasing, but demand is increasing. So there is this paradox, and so how do we evaluate current situation? So perhaps we could start now with Milena, for instance.
I'll be very brief on this one because I don't feel to be an expert on this. What I feel in this field are two things. First, I understand there are many doubts in connection with Green Deal, but I don't really understand the link between Green Deal and the current crisis, because the Green Deal has only been put on the table, in terms of the first proposals. But I can see the doubts, but the current crisis certainly has different causes, and to solve these causes, I think, the solution is not so much at the European level. There are many differences, many in this area amongst member states, and we should be clear about, what we can and what we cannot do at the EU level.
Okay, Mr. Verhofstadt.
Well, like I said, I think that energy policy has been declared European competence in 2006 in Hampton Court. Last achievement of Tony Blair and of the Brits in the European Union. There we decided that from now on we should work in energy.
But all contracts on gas supplies are bilateral,
exactly, yeah.
Right?
And nothing has been done. So we have in principle an energy union, and then everything is continues to be on the national level. But with, as a consequence, a very dangerous mix of things for the moment. We have the climate change agenda, who press us, for good reasons, to go into a new renewable energy, who is not always directly available, because that needs investment. Fortunately, there is European money that is used for that, so you can say it's all on the national level, but it will be a lot of national of European money, of the 750 billion euro Next Generation Fund, will be used for renewable energy projects. Fortunately, not enough, but fortunately. The second part of the mix is the geopolitical threat. So we are playing with a number of people who are delivering energy, especially Russia, who have their own agenda and who are not afraid to use energy as a political weapon. We know that. They did it against Ukraine, they did it against Europe already, tomorrow they can do it again. And the threat is openly expressed from time to time by Mr. Putin himself. No? He has said it already, literally. And Lukashenko today, the puppet of Putin, is doing it now on the regional level, saying that he will cut off gas coming through through Belarus. I'm not so sure who is the most, who will feel the most consequences. Maybe he will feel the most consequences because that will not increase his income of his country. Because for every cubic meter that goes to Belarus, is cash, he's paid for it. Okay, but nevertheless, energy is used as a political weapon. It's not for the first time in history yet, but Putin openly is saying that, and we are still depending on Russian gas, let's be honest. That's clear. And then there is the third element, that is that by putting all this only on the national level, saying that energy is national, we see an enormous problem that comes in a clivage, we are saying in French, in Europe, between those countries who believe in nuclear and those countries who don't believe in nuclear. With those who are saying nuclear is necessary to obtain the goals of the climate change package, and those who are saying, no, we don't want that. And we have to fall back to temporary gas, and on top of that, also different national coal. It's different. This discussion about coal is not the same in Poland as in Belgium, for example, to give only that example. So, if we don't coordinate that inside an energy union, it's a very dangerous mix that can create shortages in Europe on the short run, price increases for ordinary citizens, what is already happening, and price increases in energy prices. I can tell you that can be the start of a turmoil in public opinion. As we have seen it already in a few countries, in France, for example. So my fear is that if we don't coordinate that on the European level in an energy union, so that we use the strength of this whole energy market, we will never be able to overcome in the next 20 years this combining problems that we have: geopolitical, climate change, the fact that there are national priorities who are only counting. We need to stream them together in one coherent policy, so that the energy autonomy of this continent is at reach, not now, because that's not, but at least that could be, for example, to reinvest in nuclear, a new type of nuclear. That could be try out to find, with the purchasing power of the whole European Union, other ways of gas in the world, for example, liquefied gas coming from other parts of the world instead of what we have now with pipelines coming from Russia. That could mean, to adapt also a number of our policies, so the end of coal and so on, that need to be coordinated. Otherwise, we're gonna go into the wall with the energy policy of in Europe. And into the wall, that means shortages, what is already happening, plus price increases for citizens, and that is a very dangerous mix of problems who could create a lot of turmoil in a number of countries. So my feeling is that the so-called energy union that we declared in 2006 in Hampton, it's time to start to work on it. Also for geopolitical reasons. So because the situation is, there is no real coordination at all on energy in the Union.
Thank you. The trouble also is that if these prices stay high for a long time, politicians would blame EU once again because they wouldn't like their national governments to be blamed, obviously. So what's your take on this, Dita?
That I'm used to being blamed for Brussels. I think very briefly a lot has been said. There are for me two steps or two levels. One is what we do now, and second, what we do for the future. Now we need to help people. We need to help people. And there was a clear call from the European Parliament to really help the member states to be flexible when it comes to reducing the taxes, different stimulus checks in France, whatever, but just really, we are now firemen, so we need to really help people. And then there is this lesson learned and what we do in the future. And I agree that we will have to do more at the European level, being the question of reserves, geopolitical question, how to diversify more, what we do with the US, what we do with Norway, etc., etc. But also then it comes the green transition. And I remember when we had the first discussion with my French fellow colleagues 3 years ago, 2.5 years ago in the European Parliament about nuclear. Now it's a completely different story. President Macron last week or this week announced that nuclear will be the energy future of France. So now we have really strong ally, and I think this will actually help to change also the attitude and approach towards the green transition.
Thank you, Mr. Cole.
I try to be very brief. First, there is no energy market in Europe for many, many years, so it's so artificially influenced by different directions and regulation that it's almost impossible, in fact, to talk about the market. It's a regulated something. So just example, if you would be rich enough and you would like to invest into the energy, so in what kind of energy you would invest, in what? Because you have totally unpredictable from the business point of view, unpredictable future. So that's first point. This Green Deal is not to blame for everything, because that was a process. The Green Deal is just the top of the whole process about this green transition. We know that it's important to protect the environment and the nature, so we need to do many steps. But those steps were already put on the paper, and the so-called market or the investors into the energy already reacted to that. So we are having a great, let's say, goals. So we have the main, I wouldn't say the religion, but the main goal of the Union. What is the main goal for Union today? So to protect the environment, to have the low emission of the CO2. So it's. I was just talking with one guy in Brussels about that till this eastern part of Europe had this ideology of the communism, of this so no classes, so society, they were behind. And at the time the West was just what doing. So to be richer, so to be safer, so to be better protected, no ideology. Since the EU has adopted this goal, which is not the focus is not the wellness or the well-being of the people, normal people, but the great goal of having the world without CO2. And the people had to make the sacrifices, and we know very well, because we were educated in this mode, that we have to commit the sacrifices for a better future for our children. So that was the mantra of the communism. So now we are in the same mode and not being very realistic. So it's politically driven process. It's not an economically driven process. So we have to be a realistic approach, and that means also that each country is different, and we have to respect the differences between the countries. For the Czech Republic, for the transition period, not having the natural gas as a part of the CO2 low emissions, and first and mostly the nuclear energy, so that would mean the poverty, the energy poverty of the people, the social tensions, and no one will pay enough to those people. So from the government. They are debted already heavily, so where we will get the money for that? So first, in my view, would be less regulations, give the market forces a little bit more space.
Okay, thank you. So my last question before we open it for a few questions from the audiences. So please be brief once again. It was mentioned once again by Prime Minister, who said was against apparently the unanimity voting in foreign policy. Mr. Verhofstadt is for. On the other hand, Prime Minister said that he wants the EU to be more active in near abroad. So it's hard to imagine it, like how to do it without it. So what's your take on this, Dita?
Well, I think we can spend hours and hours discussing this topic, but I think sometimes it's a little bit chicken and egg discussion, because we all agree that we don't have efficient foreign policy as in EU. And the latest example, which is very close to the Czech Republic, what was happening in Belarus, and there were people in the streets, they were looking for the support from the West, and it took us how many? 2 months to have a common position of the European Council. 2 months to have sanctions. Is it the right approach? Is it what we really want? I'm not happy with it. I'm not happy with it. Whether the best way forward is to say, okay, so now we will decide everything by qualified majority. I don't think either. Yes, we can discuss whether in certain cases how to vote perhaps more faster, how to make decision faster. But I think that's really the topic where everybody agrees that Europe is lacking behind, which is really a weak point of Europe and where we need to do more. But at the same time, every foreign minister, being French, German, Czech, will of course defend and protect the national foreign policy. Very difficult, very difficult. I don't have an answer to it, but I have to say that the image of Europe has changed since Mr. Kissinger was saying that he doesn't have a person to call. Now he has a person to call, but he mentioned it very well. When we travel to Ankara, there are 3 people traveling, so he has 3 numbers where he can call, but still this is not how the European foreign policy should look like.
Thank you, Mr. Verhofstadt.
I can only repeat that we need absolutely to abolish it, because no organization, political organization on the continental scale can survive with unanimity. Not even nation states can survive with unanimity. The Polish know that very well. When their country disappeared for more than 100 years because of a bad organization of their parliament, where unanimity was required to take decisions. It was not the only reason, actually, but it was one of the reasons. If unanimity was still applicable in the US, because when the US started in 1776, it was the unanimity rule. So the 13 states needed to agree. And that they were losing the war against the Brits. So fortunately, after 10 years, they came to the conclusion that they need to get rid of the unanimity. And then they won the war against the Brits. It's so simple as that. A unanimity in a democratic organization like the Union has no sense. Has no sense, and it will be an obstacle. Will be an obstacle for many of our policies. And I have to tell you that in the conference, it's one of the issues that is discussed by the citizens. So say, okay, do we get rid of this, yes or no? So we will certainly come back to this issue in the coming months.
Thank you, Milena.
I think that we don't really solve the problem by putting everything into QMB. Right? The problem is not whether it's voted unanimously or qualified majority. The problem is that there are some really crucial things that we disagree, and we cannot find acceptable and sufficiently concrete compromise that everyone would be able to go and fight for it, right? I fully agree with you that it would be great to have energy union. I fully agree. I fully agree that, you know, we need it. We would be much more powerful. We would be much stronger global partner. But we disagree, and we disagree on many key issues of foreign policy. Which stance will be outvoted for Russia? Which stance will be outvoted for Israel? I could name like 5 or 6 other files, and I'll give you the 2 completely opposing camps. And I think this game is not about, you know, outvoting minority, because that creates a lot of frustration. We actually see it already in some QMV areas, for example, environmental files, where some states actually are pushed to do something that they believe is not really is not right for them, and then it really creates a very difficult situation, and it doesn't help the EU and you know, feelings about EU amongst citizens. So I think it's not really questions, do we need QMV in foreign policy? The question really is, how do we get member states closer to each other with their stance? Why are we not going to have FTA with Chile? Why? We all know that. Is that correct? No, we all know that. Is it going to happen? Yes, it's going to happen.
Thank you very much. That's in my view the problem of the external performance of the EU is not in the QMV. QMV is not. It's a nice, let's say, issue for discussion for this conference on future of Europe, which I am afraid, because I was, as I said, in the convention which was preparing the constitution for Europe in many debates. I'm a little bit afraid it's going to be a bureaucratic, not driven by the citizens but by the bureaucrats exercise with the results, which will go the way to change the treaties. And I think that after
you find that I'm a bureaucrat.
It's a bureaucrat-driven exercise.
But why is bureaucrat-driven? I'm not a bureaucrat. I'm elected. You are elected here?
No.
Okay, then talk about yourself. You're a bureaucrat.
Not only I'm not doing that. There are different. So not only in the member states, but also the European Commission. So, and that's leading to the changes of the treaties. It's going to open the Pandora box. We have already the constructive abstention in the CFSP, so let's use this instrument. It's difficult for many reasons to find a common position on different issues. So what Dita said, the External Action Service is not performing well, but why? Who is crippling this institution which we have created exactly for these reasons? Because some big member states, they have a stake and they prefer their national policy. It's not a problem of the QMV, it's about the big ones willing and doing their foreign policy outside EU. Let's name the problems. Otherwise it's going to be an artificial exercise, this conference. So we have to name the problems, and if they are willing to change their policies and to be in line, then okay. But
it's just because of the unanimity that these countries can continue to do that. Because of the unanimity, there cannot decisions be taken, and the French, to give only that example by accident, will continue their own, follow their own line. The day that you have a more, real, robust QMV, faster decision-making process, ask Borrell. So don't believe me. What I'm saying, it's Borrell who's saying that, the High Representative for the Foreign Affairs.
And it's not me who is asking to abolish the unanimity. He says it, and he said because we don't do it, it continues to be the old powers in Europe who continue their own policies of the past.
When you will put the big ones and they will do what they want in the External Action Service and not taking into account and protecting the specific relations which were named here, especially, let's say, we have with Israel. So then we will be so out of that, and the big ones will make the deals just inside as they are outside. So it's not happening. It's just let's say something very understandable for everyone, QMB or not the QMB. So it will help. Yeah, the resolution will be faster and the implementation will be faster. Why the EU is so weak outside the world? So why we are losing the weight in all areas, not even around Europe, not outside, not far away, because we don't have the muscles. We have the papers, we have the decisions, we have the resolutions in the Council, in the Parliament, but what is behind them? So what is the real weight? Where are the tools? And with the QMB, nothing is going to be faster. We are losing the economic weight, comparing. Military, exactly. So those are the main reasons, not the QMB. The QMB could be the last one. So it will make instead of all day meeting, 30 minutes. So, and always they are pre-discussed. Those decisions are pre-discussed in many working parties, so they take something.
I agree with one thing that you said, it is economic power and the military power. If you have that, and we combine that, then we should be obliged, actually, as European Union, to have a common point of view. So if you don't have a common instrument, why you need to have a common position on something. So I agree with you that even more important than only the abolishing unanimity is to have the common instruments so that you are obliged to have a common point of view of it. If you have, for example, the European intervention force, for example, that's on the table now, and something is happening in your neighborhood, then together you need to assess, will we use it or will we don't use it? Will we intervene or not intervene? Today that problem doesn't exist.
Yeah, I understand, but at that point we will have the problem, because when there will be such a decision, and the Czech Republic is, let's say, concerning Israel, because there could be something, and we are not following that, then there will be the European Court of Justice penalizing the Czech Republic for having the different policies towards Israel. It's not acceptable. So let's be realistic. Once again, let's be realistic. I don't see the big leap forward in energy transition or in the politics. That could be the big leap like those before the Cultural Revolution in China. So let's be afraid, let's be realistic, let's be rooted in what the people are in fact willing, where we are, and was this politically feasible.
The Communist Party in China is not run on unanimity, I have to tell you.
Okay, so before I invite you for the lunch, is there a question from the audience? Okay.
Maybe you understand me like this. So you speak a lot about challenges. I'm from Switzerland. We speak a lot about challenges, but solution, just one step is add unanimity. But to add the unanimity, do you need unanimity? Just really a provocative question, and how you do that? So with the risk that you lose some pieces of European Union?
Okay, maybe Dita.
Well, I think you asked the right bottom. It's crystal clear that we are now in the process of the Conference of Future of Europe. We are discussing with people how they want to shape Europe. It's true that there are a lot of people pointing out the foreign policy as the weakest point of the European Union. And there are different ideas how we should change it. We will produce recommendations, results. And it's true, if we want to change it, we will need to have unanimity in the Council. And that's why we need this discussion, to understand each other why we want to do it, and what it will bring, or what it can take out.
Thank you. Next question. Is there any? Okay, apparently everyone is looking for lunch, but Mr. Verhofstadt.
I want to come back to the previous question. You have to look to the Americans did it. So in 1776, like I already said, there were 30 member states, 30 states in the US. And they lost the war against the Brits, so the US would not have even existed. So then decided to change that. How they did it? And they went to Philadelphia in a conference. And there they decided with 9 against 4 that from now on it's majority voting that will succeed, that will be applicable. And 4 said, yeah, you cannot do that. It's impossible for the reason that you are mentioned. And the other 9 said, well, or you accept it or you leave. You know what the 4 did? They accepted it. That's the way it works in politics.
Okay, so thank you very much. Thank you. I'd like to thank all the panelists, Mr. Kohl, Milena Hrdinková, Mr. Verhofstadt, Dita Charanzová. I would like to thank all of you for coming and hopefully enjoying it. And I would like to invite all of you for a lunch now. It's a seated lunch, but with buffet, so you can move freely. Our people would navigate you. Where is it exactly, Shaka? Over there or over there? Oh, you will be navigated. Okay. So thanks a lot for coming, and we are looking forward to meet with you at our next event. And I would like to thank Mr. Charanzová and European Parliament and Renew Europe and Conference on the Future of Europe and all other our partners to cover it and help us to finance it, etc. So see you soon and thanks for coming.